This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome to a brand new season of Formula One on your radio box. Yes, we are going to be here to bring you every single moment of the 2022 season, and what a season it promises to be. So much to talk about, but I thought I'd start by giving you a little virtual tour of the paddock. So that's my plinky plonk machine. I've just gone over some beautiful Bahrainian carpets that are laid out underneath the turnstiles that let us all in. I'm just going to walk down the paddock. It's familiar faces, it's new faces, the media centre to my right and the race control tower to my left, where the FIA will sit and scrutinise what goes on across the course of a weekend. New race directors as well for this year. So much has gone on, but I'm delighted to say we do have a few familiar faces around the place. Jack Nicholls, welcome back to Formula One.
Well, it hasn't been that long, has it? Almost 100 days, and we're back in the Middle East covering a Formula One race. Really looking forward to it. Last season, maybe the best Formula One season of all time, so this year has a lot to live up to. But on paper, anyway, it sort of could be better.
Epic?
Yeah.
I'm going with epic. Media pen just to my right. You've got all other hospitality units that are kind of designed like sand castles on my right. There's beautiful palm trees. The sun is shining. Gone with those horror winds and cold temperatures from yesterday. Just taking myself under the awnings, past a few of the marshals dressed in their red outfits, and then through and into the pit lane. And I cannot tell you how joyous it is to be back in the pit lane for the start of the session. The first part of practice about to begin. There's some Lando flags to my left, a Lewis Hamilton number 44, a George Russell number 63. And talking about people moving around, different teams, Sam Bird, former Mercedes reserve and test driver, Jaguar Formula E driver. It's lovely to have you with us.
It's lovely to be here, Jenny. How's it in the paddock?
Are you excited? I mean, it's amazing. There's actual racing cars and everything. I'm just standing in front of the Mercedes garage. Lewis Hamilton just to my left, with Angela, his trainer, standing over him. A new helmet. We can talk about that in just a moment. But gone are the purple colourings from last year, and the black colourings, it's gone back to its roots from his karting days. To my right, George Russell is the man sitting in that car. Valtteri Bottas has moved teams. Sam, there really is so much to get excited about when it comes to this season.
There is so much to get excited about, Jenny. It's all changed pretty much this year for Formula One. And I'm so excited to see who's quick, who's struggling, what the pecking order is going to be. I suppose the next hour will give us a glimpse, not a full picture, but just a glimpse as to where people are right now.
I tell you where Max Verstappen is right now. He's in front of me. The gold line emblazoned on the top of his white helmet. He's got the number 1 on his car. The first time we'll see that in action across the weekend since 2014, when it was Sebastian Vettel who used it. Not been used since then. And Jack, are we over what happened at the end of last year?
Some people are, some people aren't. I think Formula One... am I? Good question. I think it depends what we see during this season, doesn't it? I think if changes are made and it's clear that sort of Abu Dhabi was a one-off, and then we can all move on, then great. But as soon as we get Hamilton and Verstappen wheel to wheel, we'll see whether last season is quite as forgotten as it is. But I think everyone is keen to move on from it.
We will have an hour on the clock when practice gets underway. A slightly reformatted weekend with 2 practice sessions getting underway a little bit later on in the sort of normal course of the day. This morning, the drivers have been spent doing media commitments. We've spoken to all of them. They all seem pretty keyed up and ready to go. And then obviously we get qualifying done after free practice 3 tomorrow, and the race on Sunday gets underway at 6 o'clock as the sun sets here in Bahrain. Just give us a little guide of the track, Sam Bird, if you can. What's it like here?
It's quite a tricky track, to be honest. The trickiest part being sector 3, especially on a qualifying lap. By turns 14, 15, the rear tyres have really given up. But you start the lap off with a very heavy braking zone, very tricky turn 2 that is flat out but puts a lot of energy through the tyres. You can find the rear of the car getting a little bit squirrely as we see one of the Ferraris heading out as I think the first car in the pit lane in 2022. red light still on, obviously. Getting towards the end of Sector 1, use all the track available at the right-hander. Then you've got the middle section of the track. A lot of turns. You've got turn 9-10 coming up, where you take the brake bias rearwards. And then you've got the final sector, which is, like I said, very, very tricky for the rear tyres.
Good stuff, cars, as you say, heading out on track. Charles Leclerc, one of the first out in his Ferrari, got all sorts of rakes and measurement devices on the back of that. Lewis Hamilton, he's headed out as well, so that means it's time for me to throw over to our commentary box. Can't wait for this first practice session of the season is underway.
Certainly is. Cars streaming out onto the circuit straight away, as you say. Very warm conditions here in Bahrain. Not very warm, but quite warm. 20 degrees the air temperature, 36.2 degrees the track temperature. Not necessarily completely representative of qualifying and the race, which will take place in more evening conditions in a few hours' time. So free practice 2 is going to be the key one, but the cars rolling out onto the circuit. As we say, we've had the Ferrari of Leclerc out, Zhou Guanyu's gone out in the Alfa Romeo, Hamilton has made his way out onto the circuit. But how much are the teams and drivers going to be able to learn in this hour, Sam? Is this kind of an extension of pre-season testing in a way, or will they be starting to knuckle down for the weekend ahead because of the track conditions and the situation we're in?
I think it's a little bit of both, Jack, to be honest. We have a condensed race format now, race weekend now, with only an hour available per session. So they've got to start doing some homework now. Okay, this being FP1 is the least relevant session of the weekend because of the timing of it as well. Remember, this is a night race weekend with qualifying being held in darkness as the race is. So yes, this is the most irrelevant, but they'll still want to do the homework right now.
So alongside Sam Bird in the commentary box is the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Here's Valtteri Bottas' radio.
I'm having quite a bit of misfiring. Okay, copy. Stand by. I'll come back to you.
So some early misfiring for Valtteri Bottas. Also a reminder, hashtag BBC F1 on Twitter and f1@bbc.co.uk on the emails if you want to get in touch. And we'll give Els a readout because about 20 minutes ago, they wrote, "I'm hell-bent on being the first tweet read out on BBC F1 in 2022. So there we go. You've won that race. Andrew Benson, welcome to 2022.
Thank you, Jack.
I know you've already been in it for a few months, but what
in more ways than one, Jack.
Exactly. What are you thinking of and looking at ahead of the upcoming season?
Well, people who've been following it up till now, from the Formula 1 season, the build-up to it anyway, will know that much of the talk has been about Mercedes and whether they're genuinely in trouble with their car. All the teams have discovered a phenomenon, or rediscovered, I should say, a phenomenon called porpoising, which is what happens with ground effect cars, which is what, or can happen with ground effect cars, which is the kind of technology that's been reintroduced into Formula 1 this year after 40 years. And Mercedes have been struggling with it particularly. Now, this morning, for the first time, the teams are required to give to the FIA information about changes they've made to their cars ahead of this race weekend. And Mercedes have given actually a really comprehensive rundown of the new bits they've got on their car. And among them are a new side floor edge. And the floor is the part that has most influence on the porpoising that I was talking about. And they've made changes to try to affect that. So they're going to be looking this session to see whether that is basically the car bounces on the straights. They're going to be looking to see whether that has stopped happening or whether they've reduced it. And that'll have what's important about that is what you're trying to do is optimize your ride height. You want to get the car as low as possible without the porpoising starting. And the team that does best this weekend is basically going to be the one who gets the car as low as they can without the porpoising happening.
So I saw one of my old friends from Mercedes, a guy called Evan Short, who isn't short at all. He's a giant of a man. And I said, look, how's it looking? Where do you think the pecking order is right now? And he said, well, honestly, we don't know. All I can tell you is if we can stop the car bouncing around, we should be okay. And that's all I could take away from that. So it was very short, but at least I think that if Mercedes can stop significant bouncing around, we could see them right at the sharp end.
It was quite interesting actually yesterday going around the paddock and hearing the different views of what might be going on. So everyone had looked at testing, especially the last day, and thought, oh my goodness, that Red Bull looks frighteningly fast. But then people started saying yesterday, we were hearing it wasn't running very much fuel for those runs, that they were genuine low fuel runs at the end of the days when they set those quickest times. And people are saying that Ferrari never turned their engine up through the whole of testing. And people are saying that Mercedes were running with basically 80 kilos of fuel the vast majority of the time. Now, I don't know whether any of that's true, but it's the sort of thing that it underlines how difficult it is and why teams say, actually, we really don't know. Because they don't know whether Mercedes were running 80 kilos of fuel or 20 kilos. 10 kilos of fuel is 3.5 tenths of a second a lap.
Yeah, it's really impossible to pick anything out from testing. At the moment, we've got Norris and Ricciardo first and second quickest for McLaren, 6 minutes into the session. A 1 minute 36.584 for Lando Norris, 3 tenths quicker than Ricciardo. Perez is third. Both of the McLarens are on the soft tyre. Hamilton and Russell are fourth and fifth for Mercedes on the medium tyre. I'll just give you a run through of the teams and drivers just so we're all up to speed, because I will be misidentifying people in the first practice. And a bit of Alpine, I think, has come off down the start-finish straight, and a fairly sizable chunk of what almost looks like side pod or something, Sam?
Yeah, that's bizarre, isn't it? I mean, it looks like it's just ripped off the side of the car. So whether that's, again, aggressive bouncing and the car hasn't liked it, one of the nuts has come loose, I'm not sure.
Well, I would predict it's Ocon, because Alonso is in the pit lane. Ocon coming down over the start-finish straight, and yeah, it's sort of the right-hand side of the car is kind of just shattered almost. Very, very strange, and bits of carbon fibre flying off all over the place. So that could be our first full course yellow, or virtual safety car, I should say, of the weekend. Nico Hülkenberg's had a lock-up coming down into the tight right-hander of turn 8. Yes, I'll give you the run-through of the team. So, Alfa Romeo is Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas. Alfa Tauri remain with Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. Alpine remain with Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. Aston Martin are Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, but Vettel tested positive for COVID, so it's Nico Hülkenberg who's in as super sub this weekend. Ferrari is Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Haas is Kevin Magnussen replacing Nikita Mazepin, and he's alongside Mick Schumacher. McLaren remain with Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. Mercedes have George Russell joining Lewis Hamilton. Red Bull are the same with Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. And Williams have Alex Albon replacing or backfilling for George Russell, and he is alongside Nicholas Latifi. It's not a virtual safety car, it's a first red flag of the session for that debris on the start-finish straight.
So we just saw that major lock-up from Nico Hülkenberg going down the hill into the hairpin right-hander. He's done that on the hard compound in FP1. Now that tyre set, he would have wanted to run deep into this session. That's going to be like a 50 pence piece now, Jack. That's not going to be comfortable at all. That really disrupts the work that they're going to want to do, and he's going to want to do a lot of mileage because he hasn't driven in such a long time.
Well, that was going to be my question with Hülkenberg. Red flag out, the cars are returning to the pit lane. But is he at much of a disadvantage coming into this session? Because,
Yes.
But compared to when he was coming in to do his first race, was it the Nürburgring in 2020? You're 3/4 of the way through the season. Everyone's had he's only kind of 6 days behind in running as opposed to 30.
Yeah, but it's all the time out of the car. When I've had Christmas off and then you get back in the car, you feel slightly rusty. Nico's had a long period out.
The other thing to bear in mind, Sam, I guess, is that these are not just any cars, are they? These are cars like nothing he's ever driven before.
Yeah, these are brand new toys that he's got to get to grips with, and everybody else has driven multiple days in them and had multiple races since his last race. Okay, he's had the simulator to work on and help hone his skills, but it's not the same as driving in reality. And then it's definitely different when you get out there and trying to face the music with people going wheel to wheel.
I think drivers are a bit rusty. I called it a full course yellow, which everyone is now slating me for on hashtag BBCF1. There we go. Jenny Gao is down in the pit lane.
It's just speaking to Nico Hülkenberg this morning, I think he's in a little bit of a better place than he was in Germany last time he got called in as a super sub, because he had to come in and just qualify. He hadn't driven it, and then he was qualifying, so at least he's got a little bit of time to get himself around the idea of doing a race weekend. But he flew in, landed at midnight last night or this morning, depending on if it was 1 minute to or past, Carlos Sainz. He switched his engine off now. One of the Ferrari mechanics is standing behind me, just having a really good look at the Red Bull of Sergio Perez, which is just to my left. I'm about a metre away from it, and it is fascinating. All the teams are checking out everybody else's car. What have they done? What have they done over the winter? What have they done since the last test? And I find this bit of gameplay and gamesmanship brilliant, because you'll speak to a team and they'll say, no, we don't focus on anyone else but ourselves. But they actually have team members deployed to look at other cars and work out what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, every team pretty much pays a professional photographer to go out there and take pictures of all the other cars. The engineers will say, right, I want you to take a picture of the Aston Martin floor at the rear, and we'll get proper spy shots of that and exactly that. So, yeah, it's saying that they only concentrate on themselves is an absolute lie.
So red flag's still out. The debris has been cleared from just below us here in Bahrain. The order at the moment is Norris quickest, Ricciardo second, still that 1 minute 36.584 for Lando Norris. 8 tenths back to Perez and Verstappen, third and fourth. Gasly fifth, those all on the hard tyres. Hamilton and Russell are on the medium tyres for Mercedes. Then Sainz is 8th, Tsunoda 9th, Hülkenberg 10th, Stroll, Zhou, Leclerc, Bottas, Magnussen. Oh no, in fact, Leclerc in 13th is the last driver to have set a lap time. The others have just done an installation lap. Fernando Alonso has not been out at all yet in his Alpine, and they've already repaired Esteban Ocon's Alpine. They've just put a new side pod cover on, and he's good to go by the looks of it. Very swift stuff. They got a new side pod on before the one was cleared off the start-finish straight.
Yeah, that was a quick fix though, wasn't it? It was just something wasn't done up properly and it's ripped off, and yeah, that didn't take too long at all, Jack.
So, waiting for the session to get back underway. Some work going on at the front of Valtteri Bottas's car. He was complaining of the misfiring earlier on, wasn't he? And he only did an installation lap, Valtteri Bottas, whereas Zhou did a couple of laps.
Yeah, he came in very gingerly. The last sector he was very, very slow. So whether there's a little software glitch there, I'm not sure.
Jenny?
Yeah, just having a little look at the cars. It was my first real eyes on them, and the concept, the philosophy of these cars, so different from last year, but also so different from each other. Remember, there's no kind of copying allowed, so each team has to go away and come up with their own design concept, their own ideas and their own interpretations of the rules laid out by Formula One. And we saw the car at Silverstone last year, the one that Formula One had designed to these regulations. And yes, there are some elements which are quite similar, like the rear wing, which is this beautiful kind of bowed effect now, the front wings, which have these kind of gull wings on the side of them. But there are some that are very different, and side pods are such a major talking point. Who knew that's what we'd be talking about? But I've just come from Ferrari down to Mercedes, and the difference when you look at the sides of these cars, it's like a giant ashtray on wheels at Ferrari, and then you come up to Mercedes and there's no side pod. It's so bizarre looking at a car like this. It screws your mind.
Well, it's very interesting, because the side pods were sort of invented really for cooling purposes and that sort of thing. They always played a big part in. So Mercedes are obviously happy with that side of thing. But it is quite nice that the cars do look considerably different, because there was a lot of concern, these new regs, all the cars will look the same, but they really don't.
I mean, calling the Ferrari a giant ashtray
on
is
wheels,
doing it a disservice, because I think it looks smoking hot.
Yeah.
Do you get it?
Oh,
there we go.
Wow.
There we go. Jokes in me today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that there's different philosophies, different ideas, different concepts. I think that as the season goes on, we might see people start to converge a little bit on the ideas. But certainly the start of this year, it's fantastic to see so many different ideas on what could be the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So delighted to have Sam Bird with us here in the commentary box here in Bahrain. A lot of you agreeing as well on hashtag BBC F1. We're going to have a rotating roster of people alongside me this year. We'll have Sam Bird for some. We're going to have some visits from Jack Aitken, from Jamie Chadwick, from Mark Priestley. Jolyon Palmer may return from time to time, but I think he's grouting his bathroom this weekend or something. So yeah.
That's what you're looking forward to most, aren't you? Jolyon being back. I mean, yeah.
You don't need to be quite so jealous quite so early on in this session.
Well,
Jenny?
Not jealous. I'm not jealous at all. It's fun. I've just come down to the giant ashtray on wheels just to have another look. Charles Leclerc is looking into the cockpit at the moment, just steps over, takes his left leg in and gets prepared to sit into there. I described it as a tortellini the other day as well. It's just these deep rims that move around the side of that car as their side pods. It's such a very radical concept. But even this morning, Jack, we were seeing new bits put onto cars. Nothing stands still in Formula One, and as you say, maybe they'll converge on what is the best philosophy to run. Maybe they'll be totally different, and they'll continue to be totally different all through the season. We just don't know. But yeah, I think it's Aston Martin and Alpine. They have little updates today. We know that the brake issues that McLaren suffered through the last test here in Bahrain, they've got updates this weekend for that as well. So the teams have been working absolutely flat out, and I would expect there to be little tweaks made as they go through the course of today and tomorrow as well, up until Parc Fermé rules come into play after qualifying.
Absolutely, and although we're expecting, as Sam mentioned, some sort of convergence, Andrew, it's not as though all the other teams can just take their side pods off, as if that's the quickest way to go.
No, there's no way anyone else could copy what Mercedes have done. It's to be impossible for this season, which is why there's been such a controversy about the people may see, if they look at the Mercedes, there's a kind of arm sticking out just in front of the driver on either side of the cockpit, and it's kind of shaped aerodynamically, and it's got the mirrors on top of it with some strakes underneath them, attaching them to the thing sticking out. Now, the thing sticking out is the side impact structure, and it's not really meant to be an aerodynamic aid, and some of the teams have been upset about that, particularly the mounting of the mirrors. And there's ongoing discussions about what that means, and there's talk about it being that design being potentially outlawed for next year, but that's attached to the chassis, so it would be basically impossible for anyone else to change that. In the same way, in 2017, people may remember Ferrari were very clever with the way they integrated the side impact structures in their design, and that gave them a big advantage for a lot of that season when they should really have won the championship, frankly. And there's lots of other features on the cars that aren't easily transferable either, because if you look at the Red Bull and Mercedes, for example, they're completely different philosophies. They're both trying to achieve the same thing, maximum downforce at various parts of the car. But for Red Bull have got side pods that stick out at the top but are heavily undercut at the bottom to get one form of airflow. And Mercedes have got side pods that basically look like people have taken a hammer to them and flattened them against the side of the car to get a different kind of airflow. So the whole car is optimized around, or theoretically optimized anyway, the Mercedes isn't optimized yet, but the whole design is optimized around those concepts. So you can't switch from one to another very easily at all in the middle of a season. It's too complicated.
Session will resume at 15:20, so that is in about 90 seconds time. Cars will be out on track. Quite a long delay really for that little bit of debris, which isn't going to help the teams running at all. The race director this weekend is Niels Wittig, who along with Eduardo Freitas is one of the two men brought in to replace Michael Massey as race director. So it's Niels Wittig this weekend and Saudi Arabia as well. And then Eduardo Freitas will get his first run later on in the year. I presume Freitas is still doing the World Endurance Championship, which is why he's not here this weekend.
That is the problem, yeah. In fact, there's a bit of rumbling in the paddock that the idea originally was that Freitas would be the race director, and he ended up not being able to be because he wanted to be still at the World Endurance Championship. Sam's nodding as if he has heard that too and is agreeing. But I'll ask him whether he thinks that is true.
I believe that is true, and I have to say I've worked with Eduardo. I think he's super fair and he's very, very competent at what he does, so I think he's a decent fit for Formula One.
Which brings me to the next point I was going to make. I spoke to someone extremely senior yesterday who was asking why would anyone make that decision given that it's Formula One. It's like, come on guys, the WEC is the WEC, and lots of people love the WEC, but Formula One is like so far above every other form of motorsport in terms of status. Some people in Formula 1 are questioning why Eduardo Freitas won't just give up the WEC and concentrate solely on Formula 1, because a lot of people also don't think that having two race directors for one series is necessarily a particularly great idea.
So some people don't do this, Andrew, just for the status. I know you do this to be the BBC's F1 chief writer, but some people do it for the love of the sport. And maybe Eduardo Freitas loves endurance racing.
Yeah, but he's been doing it for 20 years. He must
means he
really
loves
love
it.
it, mustn't he?
I've seen Eduardo at a random test day at Estoril, just there because he loves the cars. He's a massive motorsport fan, and he loves his endurance racing. And okay, he's doing these first couple of races, but I think, okay, I get the status of Formula One being the pinnacle of motorsport, but I don't see a problem with him doing something else as well.
I don't disagree with two race directors, though, could lead to a little bit of complexity throughout the year. Jenny?
Yeah, I just wonder if you think that the job of race director is a poison chalice now. Would you want to expose yourself? And after seeing what Michael Massey went through, fairly or unfairly, do you want to line yourself up for that?
I think you're always going to get judged, Jenny, aren't you? I think no matter what you do, if you make the right decision, you don't get praised. However, if you make the wrong decision, you're going to get hammered. I suppose it's like being the manager of Man United at the moment. Similar sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very true, actually. Cars are back out on track. Less than 39 minutes on the clock now. Still those lap times all the same with Norris, Ricciardo, Perez, Verstappen. But we are now seeing everyone out on circuit because 13 cars went out and did 4 laps before the red flag came out. And then the other 7 all did an install lap and then remained in the pit lane. In fact, Fernando Alonso didn't leave the pit lane, but he has done now. Nicholas Latifi in the Williams is just coming into the final corner on the circuit at turn 14, weaving from left to right. He's on the hard tyres, trying to get a bit of temperature in. New tyres this weekend as well, in terms of the bigger wheel rims that the cars are running, which I guess the team's going to notice an impact from the different wheels, Sam, or because it's part of a whole change, everything's different. So maybe the wheels and tyres don't stand out quite so much.
No, the tyres stand out massively, Jack. Tyres are such a crucial element of a racing car. You think of the car being, this monster thing of carbon fibre, but the thing that's connected to the ground is the tyre. You need that tyre to be in the perfect optimum operating window all the time. With the difference in size, the tyre now it acts as part of the suspension. The car is effectively stiffer than it used to be, with the sidewall that was very soft and compliant and moved around a lot. Now there's no room for it to move because the rim is so much larger. So it is completely different. How the tyre heats up will be different. Its construction is slightly different. We're yet to see what it's like on a long run, really. It is all changed this year in Formula One, not just the car, but the tyre as well.
37 minutes to go. Peter on #BBCF1 says, moved to Amsterdam, signed a contract with Ziggo, and have just realised they've lost the F1 coverage, so it's not on Ziggo anymore. So now he's totally reliant on us. So we have a lot of heavy lifting to do this year. Well, thank you for joining us for the season, Peter. Jenny, Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, he's still in the garage, unfortunately, at the moment for him. The Alfa Romeo team just trying to help him. They've got so there's 2 kind of holes that the mechanics can get their hands into just by the driver pedals, really, inside. And they're just there rummaging around. One of them's got a little torch shining that down. They're also doing some work on the rear end of the car as well, but just a little tinkering on the right-hand side. But such an uncomfortable job. I don't know if you've ever played the game where you have to put your hands in gloves through some holes and try and work out what's inside the container that you're putting your hands into, or try and thread, a key off a ring in the same scenario. If you've done that at a fair or something, you'll know what the mechanics are doing right now. It's hard work.
And if you've never done that at a fair, you'll still have no idea what Jenny's talking about. So after that, I don't think I've ever done one of those where you put your sort of hands in a box and you don't know what's in the box. Have you ever done it? Oh, Sam laughing as if he has, but doesn't want to tell that particular story.
No, just let's move away and let's talk about the racing.
35 and a half minutes. You're not going to enjoy BBC F1 with that attitude. A few of you getting in touch, actually, after that little conversation we just had. Dean says, just sounds like pure arrogance viewing F1 in such a way, and is one of the issues of the series. That is the thinking that Eduardo Freitas should sort of quit. the WEC and join Formula One full time. Bethany says, I think F1 rates itself a bit too highly. It's hardly the be-all and end-all. But Max Verstappen has gone to the top of the times now. 1 minute 34.783 on the medium tyre. 4/10 quicker than Fernando Alonso, who's second fastest on the softs. Sergio Perez has just gone third fastest now, 1.2 seconds back from his teammate Verstappen. I'm just getting a look again at Alex Albon coming into turn 2, and cold tyres. He's almost had a spin at the left-hander at turn 2. Managed to save it, but that would have been a bit of one of those embarrassing ones that doesn't cause any trouble, but feel a bit silly.
Yeah, absolutely. The heat of the tyre, the regulation has changed this year on how hot they can be inside the blankets because of the tyre size again. He's running the hardest compound tyre out the pits. It will be tricky.
34 minutes to go. Lewis Hamilton on the medium tyres as opposed to the hards that Albon was on is coming through the left-hander now of turn 11. And look, this is a niche thing, but Hamilton has the fluorescent T-cam this season, which is overall, I would suggest, the number 2 car kind of gets the fluorescent camera. Is kind of how it works.
See, I have the fluorescent one in Formula E. Are you trying to say that I'm the number 2 driver in Formula E? If you are, then we're not going to get on this year.
Which driver do the team prefer?
Well, that's besides the point. In my eyes, I'm not.
But overall, conceptually, that is how it worked. And I said this once to Palmer, and he didn't realise he'd had the yellow one for 2 years. But Hamilton has gone with the yellow one because, Jenny, I think it's matching all of his helmet and stuff.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably what it is. Is he ready?
Car feels very affected by the wind compared to last week.
Russell saying the car feels very affected by the wind compared to last week. We'll have a chat about gusts in a moment. Do carry on, Jenny.
Thank you. Yeah, he's gone with this kind of luminous yellow colour, I think you could say. If you think back to his karting days, that's where it heralds on for his helmet this year. He actually revealed it just before this session, saying for this year's helmet, I wanted to show love to my beginnings. As much as I love purple and black, yellow is my history. And going into this season with the same dedication, drive and passion I had way back in my karting days, with a nice kind of yellowy orange heart after that. And I suspect he, being one of great style, has gone, well, it just makes sense to have the same colour camera box as it does to have as his helmet. But it's a peculiarity, and I'm glad you pointed it out. Otherwise, looking down the pit lane where I am now at the other end at Haas, I would have got them mixed up for sure.
Yeah, he's also got the fluorescent 44 on the nose of the car, Hamilton too. And I loved his helmet from like 2007, that sort of Senna inspired lid.
On the camera thing, Jack, have you seen which way around the Ferraris are? Because Leclerc's the kind of like chosen son, if you like, but Sainz finished ahead in the championship last year.
Oh, and
it'd be interesting. It's often that way around that they decide who was ahead in the championship. It'd be interesting to see what they've done.
Well, I have not spotted it just yet, so we'll keep an eye out on that one. All the important answers for you here on BBC F1. Max Verstappen still fastest on his 34.783. Hamilton has now returned to the pit lane. His teammate George Russell is 8th fastest, 1.7 seconds away from Verstappen. So big field spread at the moment, and not particularly representative lap times coming in. Had a great tweet here on hashtag BBC F1 from Stuart, who says Sam Bird is proving to be an excellent commentator, though I'm a bit worried if he follows his Formula E form, he'll get punted out of the commentary box by Andrew Benson about halfway through the race.
I was just getting nudged a minute ago, so yeah, that's typical. I might have to send one down the inside in a minute. Typical my style.
Yeah.
We've actually just seen a small component from the rear of George Russell's car come flying off, going down into the braking zone at turn 1, flying up in the air and landing to the inside of the circuit. The Mercedes is running stiffer than what it wants to in order to stop this porpoising. That, in my eyes, when you run stiffer than you want to, you're basically taking lap time away from yourself.
Porpoising, Andrew, we didn't really get it. We haven't seen any visibly today, I would suggest, but it may still be happening. But what is happening when we're seeing this car bounce up and down the straights? You might have seen it on the F1 socials and stuff.
Well, the Mercedes of Russell was bouncing on the straight just then when we saw that happen. I was just about to ask Sam whether that was porpoising or bumps, actually. So what's happening is these cars work in a completely different way from last year. They've got shaped underbodies. It's like an upturned aeroplane wing. And the idea is to accelerate the air underneath the car, and that creates a low pressure area. The problem is that when the car gets to, as the car goes faster and faster, the downforce goes up and up and up. And that sucks the car further and further towards the track. And it gets to a point where the airflow, which has to be really smooth and attached to the bodywork to work properly, can't stay attached anymore. And it does something called stall. And that means that the downforce suddenly reduces a lot. And so the car jumps up in the air when it goes. But then when the ride height goes up again, the airflow reattaches, the downforce comes back on, the car starts to sink back to the track, then it gets to that point, that critical point again, bang, it goes up again. But it happens at quite a high frequency, and it's basically just bouncing up and down all the way down the straight. Once it gets to whatever velocity it is that starts to happen at. And it's a thing that's peculiar to ground effect cars. And it was quite commonplace back in the late 70s and early 80s for people who are old enough to remember Formula 1 back then, like I am. But it seems to have caught all the teams by surprise, which surprises me because it was such a common thing back in that time. But what's interesting, and this may just be a coincidence, although I suspect it's probably not, there's one man in the paddock who works in car design who was around in Formula 1 just in the early 80s. Guess who?
Is the answer obvious?
Yes.
Okay, who then?
Go on, Sam.
Adrian Newey.
It's Adrian Newey.
Of
And
course,
which
right.
car is not suffering from porpoising at the moment?
Red Bull.
The Red Bull.
Interesting.
But Jack wasn't born then. We were.
Yeah. You're doing well.
I am. It's all that Botox.
I actually don't think I realised Newey was around in the early ground effect days.
Yeah, it was the very beginning of his career, and actually he did a thesis on ground effect aerodynamics when he was at Southampton University.
Have you read it?
No.
They must have it in the archives. No. If you're listening from Southampton University, can we get Adrian Newey's thesis for Andrew Benson?
And of course, he carried on working in other categories. He was in Formula 1 initially, and then he moved on to working for March, where he worked in Indy cars and sports cars. So he's got such a really broad experience of different kinds of aerodynamics, but particularly he has some working knowledge of ground effect, even though what was allowed then was different in the sense that they had what are called skirts, which seal the underfloor and go down to the track on each side of the car. They're not allowed to do that now, but they're trying to create that seal between the edge of the floor and the track aerodynamically. And if you want to read a bit more about this, you can read the Secret Aerodynamicist column on the BBC Sport website. He is an actual aerodynamicist who works for one of the Formula 1 teams, and no, I'm not going to tell you which one. And it's very informative if you're interested in these sorts of things.
You wouldn't tell us how you get to Spa, so you're not going to tell us who the secret aerodynamicist is. Someone also, and or your dad's name. I think you refused to tell us your dad's name once as well, or your middle name. It was one of those. But anyway,
both, I think.
Yeah, I forgot to do a sync as well earlier on, so that's my bad. For those of you wanting to sync up, we've got 26 minutes and 50 seconds to go. 49, 48, 47. 46, 26 minutes, 45 seconds on the clock. Jenny Gow is at Haas.
I am. They're just pushing Mick Schumacher back into the garage. He's finished his planned running for the time being. He'll go out again. And just in front of me on the other side of the garage, it is Kevin Magnussen. And it's delightful to have him back in the paddock. It was a bit of a last-minute phone call. I don't think he was expecting it, but I was speaking to him this morning, and he just said he's so happy to be back to get another chance in Formula 1. And he said he didn't know how much he missed it until he came back, and then he went, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. So he's not had a huge amount of time to get to grips with the car. Like a couple of other people in this paddock, he will be on a little bit on the back foot, but I just wanted to ask you what you felt about this dynamic in this garage, because obviously it's very different for Mick Schumacher in his second season in Formula 1 going up against Kevin Magnussen.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? This fight between Magnussen and Schumacher, because Schumacher had a strong year last year against Nikita Mazepin, but difficult to judge. Whereas you've got a real proper benchmark with Magnussen.
Exactly. This is a big year for Mick, young Mick. He's up against a proper talent in Kevin Magnussen. No disrespect to Nikita Mazepin. I'm sure he was capable, but there's capable, and yet there's now experience in the team, a real team leader in Kevin Magnussen, somebody that knows Haas inside out, somebody that's been on the podium in Formula One before, somebody that knows how to drive a Formula One car right on the limit. And in order for his career to progress, he's going to need to outpace the likes of Kevin Magnussen on a regular basis if he wants to move up the grid.
That is absolutely key for Schumacher, and so I guess it's maybe good for him. He's got that year under his belt as well, because that'll give him a better opportunity. 24 minutes to go. Still that Verstappen time from a little earlier on the medium tyres that's quickest, a 1 minute 34.742. Perez found a second or so on that last lap, so he's now 0.3 adrift of his teammate. They're both on the medium tyres. Alonso and Ocon are third and fourth quickest for Alpine, but they are 0.4 back and 1 second back, respectively. There's currently 4 seconds separating the 19 drivers that have set the lap time. Valtteri Bottas still in the pits after his troubles earlier on.
So besides seeing that Red Bull are quick, of course they're quick, I've still got no idea after 35 minutes what the pecking order is going to be. Do you? I've got no idea. I mean, we've got the Alpines up there, but they've been running on the softs. I think Ferrari are very competent. McLaren, they've been running on the softs, but where are they at? Where are they at with their brakes? Are they going to be able to do the full race? We don't know. So many unanswered questions.
McLaren are they feel like they're in a bit of a weird middle ground after tests, but they haven't quite made the step that it seems Ferrari have. They seem to be clear of the midfield. Even Lando Norris, speaking today, was sort of using these kind of vague, looking forward to fighting with the sort of front guys, but not a full commitment in, fighting at the front. But hopefully we're not with the AlphaTauris anymore, kind of seemed to be the vague suggestion.
Well, I think their confidence got a bit knocked in the second test. They had a really good first test, and lots of people were looking at them and thinking, oh, crikey, the McLaren looks pretty quick. And then they got to Bahrain a week ago, and they had front brake cooling problems, and they basically couldn't do any long running. They were able to do short runs, but not long runs because the brakes were getting too hot, and they couldn't fix it over 3 whole days at Bahrain despite flying new parts in. They've brought new parts again this weekend. I spoke to Andreas Seidel, the team principal, yesterday, and he was hopeful that it would be fixed, but not 100% confident, I think. So they're in, that's the nerves at McLaren at the moment. They don't, until they got out on track, they'll have a much better idea by the end of this session. But until they got out on track today, they didn't really know whether their brakes were going to last the race distance, basically. That's not a great place to be heading into a race weekend.
Wise. Good, very true. Here comes Lewis Hamilton. He's wound up for a lap now. He's come through the final couple of corners, weaving around. And it's reigning champion Max Verstappen, who's fastest at the moment. He's done a 1 minute 34.7, but we're in bright sunshine here in Bahrain, so this free practice session isn't particularly representative when it comes to qualifying in the race, which will both take place at night. Lewis Hamilton in his silver Mercedes has just started a flying lap now, so we'll see what kind of lap times he can do, and we've got the rest of the coverage on 5 Live Sports Extra. Hamilton now coming through the quick sequence of corners at 5, 6, 7, then down to the tight right-hander of turn 8. And the first sector for Hamilton is a 31.9, so he's almost 2 seconds off the pace, so presumably long running.
It looks that way, but also the rear of the car looks a handful, Jack. When he gets to the mid-corner and then tries to get on the power, the rear of the car is squirming around quite a lot.
I feel like he might have backed off because he was sort of doing a bit of strange weaving coming out of 10 there.
Yeah, out of 4 and through the snaky section, the rear was all over the place. Looked very, very tricky to drive. I think he's backed off this lap, like you said.
Yeah, he's going to come through the middle sector now, about 4.7 seconds down on Verstappen. So we'll see what he does next time around. Currently running 8th fastest, 3rd and 4th at the moment though for Alpine, Jenny.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso is in the garage at the moment. He's sitting in his car with a black camera box, just in case you wanted to know. And I think they're doing a big switch on the suspension. Doesn't look like it's particularly happy. So they've got where the number is number 14. They've just lifted that off the bodywork so that they've got access to it, and they're just changing the setup for him. So even though he's set a decent time on the soft tyres, I don't think he's particularly happy in that car. Certainly that's what it looks like. And when it comes to the other side of the garage, it's empty at the moment. Esteban Ocon is out on track, but the team are investigating that issue that caused the new upgraded side pod to come loose from Esteban's car. It's the first time it's been run, so obviously there's still teething problems, and there are so many new parts on all of these cars up and down the pit lane. They're still, this is a really big test session for them. In essence, they've got 1 hour on the clock. They've got to start the run plans and go through all the preparation, but they are still trying out new parts, new bits on their cars.
Yeah, non-stop, less than 20 minutes to go in this first free practice session. Simon Baker says porpoising was one of the biggest limiting factors for Colin Chapman's Lotus 80 of 1979. Apparently it was intended to run without overbody wings, but the porpoising meant that the downforce couldn't properly be harnessed, says Simon, in your little lesson there about the olden days. 19 and a half minutes to go. Verstappen still quickest, Perez second. Hamilton has returned to the pits then, so interesting, because he seemed like he was really getting set up for a quick lap that we saw the start of, then he backed off, and then now he's in the pits.
Well, he wanted it to be a quick lap, obviously, but it was soon apparent that it wasn't the case. To me, watching, it looks like Russell is slightly stiffer but slightly lower, and it looks like Hamilton is slightly softer yet slightly higher. It looks like they've done something to split the cars to see what works better around this racetrack, what will be easier to drive, what will be quicker.
Jenny.
Yeah, just made my way to McLaren. They've got quite a fancy new, I suppose it's new, I was going to say kind of layout in the garage, but to be honest, they could have done it at any point in the last couple of years. I wouldn't be the wiser, would I? But there we go. It looks new to me. And the car is looking pretty impressive as well. The papaya orange is black, flashes of blue along it. Daniel Ricciardo sitting just watching the screens, which means it's impossible for me to see his face. But I have to say, he's coming back from COVID. He missed the last testing session. He just about managed to test negative in time to come into the paddock yesterday. His media commitments, he said normally Thursdays are quite grueling and aggressive, but he felt okay. And I asked him, how are you going to handle this race? Because you are coming back. You said you had it pretty severely and it knocked you off your feet. And I don't think he really knows. He's hopeful that he's going to be absolutely fine. He said in training he feels okay, but a 2-hour race, I think people often underestimate just how taxing that is on a driver. They think it's just people going around in circles and they don't have to really exert themselves too much.
Yeah, it's very frustrating as George Russell just about misses the Ferrari. George Russell has incidentally gone on to the soft tyre, so this will be interesting to see what his pace is like compared to Red Bull. But going back to the fitness thing, it really annoys me when people say, but all you do is just sit about and you just turn left and right. It's not that. Our bodies are subjected to some really intense G-forces and a lot of heat. Also, when you're focusing so hard on something as quick as a Formula One car, when milliseconds matter, it takes a lot out of you mentally, which in turn takes a lot out of you physically.
The sound you can hear is George Russell coming through down into turn 12 and he's 13 and he's up on Verstappen. He's done the fastest middle sector. He's on the soft tyres. Verstappen's that time was on the medium tyres and it was quite a while ago now. There's also a quick time coming in from Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, although as I say that, he is facing the wrong way at turn 11. He's managed to loop back around and get going again. Russell comes across the line now and he goes fastest. A 1:34.629 on the softs, just over a tenth quicker than Verstappen. But Leclerc was quicker than Russell in the first sector before that spin.
Also worth pointing out here, Jack, that okay, we don't know the fuel loads, but the soft tyres probably at least half a second, possibly even as much as a second faster than the medium that Verstappen was on, and Russell's only just over a tenth faster than Verstappen. So that if they're on the same fuel load, which they might not be, but that doesn't look that great for Mercedes at the moment.
Nice full pirouette for Charles Leclerc on the exit of 11.
Yeah, just a little bit throttle happy on the exit. Those tyres aren't going to be nice though now. They'll be very second-hand.
Big 360, didn't hit anything, Leclerc, and then continued on his way. We'll see whether he does go for another run. And his first sector was impressive considering he was on the medium tyre on that push lap. So it is Russell fastest, Verstappen second, Perez third. Verstappen is back out on track, still on the medium tyre. Tsunoda has now gone fourth quickest in the AlphaTauri on the soft tyre. A driver who really he was very strong actually in Bahrain here last year, then kind of disappeared for 3/4 of the season and then came back fairly well towards the end.
Is he another driver that needs a strong season? You know, it's his second year. There was talk of in middle of the season last year not really impressing the team, but then he's kept and retained his drive for this year. Is Yuki on the bubble this year? What does he need to do? And who else needs a good year, Jack, in your eyes?
I think that Tsunoda certainly does. Mick Schumacher, as we've discussed earlier. Ricciardo, we mentioned that, okay, maybe this weekend he gets a bit of a COVID pass, for want of a better phrase. But after last season, he's got quite a lot of work to do, I think, Ricciardo. Sainz has just been held up by one of the Haas cars. I wasn't quite sure which one it was. And then also George Russell too. Jenny?
Yeah, I'm just thinking who's got work to do, who needs to prove a point. I think Alpine, in general. They have Fernando Alonso until the end of the year. Unless they can start being the team that they want to be. You know, they're a huge manufacturer. And it feels to me like they've got to prove that they're serious about this. They've got to bring a car that works. They've got to get a lot of change has happened in that team over the last 6-7 months. They've got to establish themselves again, I think, and give Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, now a race winner, a car that will mean that they can challenge and that they can be a serious competitor in Formula 1.
Fascinating to see what happens in that intra-team battle, as it will be in so many of them. A quick question here from Stu G. See if Andrew Benson has an answer. Who, pre-Magnussen, was the last driver to compete in Formula 1, having done a season in IMSA?
I hate it when you throw to me on these things. I don't know.
Stu G reckons it was Perry McCarthy.
Maybe.
There we go. Although he says compete in F1 is a bit of a stretch.
I wouldn't say Perry McCarthy ever competed in F1, really, did he?
13 minutes to go. Gasly now to the top of the times on the soft tyre. He's gone 4/10 quicker than George Russell on the same tyre. So big lap there from the Frenchman.
Yeah, and only 5 minutes later than when George did his time, as Sainz now pops on to second on the medium. So track definitely improving. I think as obviously the temperature does come down slightly, the track rubbers in more. We normally see this in FP1 where times just get quicker and quicker. The other guy that's doing quite well is Latifi up in 9th.
Yeah, in the Williams. That's a good lap from Latifi. We've got Carlos Sainz has just gone second fastest in the Ferrari on the medium tyres, quicker than Verstappen's medium tyre run. Lance Stroll slots into 5th place now on the soft tyres. Whoever was ahead of Stroll coming into turn 1 just had quite a big lock-up. Not quite sure who that was, and I'll try and work that out. Could have been Kevin Magnussen, but we've got 12 minutes to go. Gasly quickest. Leclerc now goes second in the other Ferrari. So Ferrari's second and third, both on the medium tyre.
And on those tyres that he's done a spin on, so not bad. That Ferrari's working very well at this stage of the weekend.
Pierre Gasly now with a coming through the left-hander at 11.
What a lap. That was nice. We're getting to the mojo now.
Yeah.
We're getting to the mojo, says Gasly's engineer. Really love that AlphaTauri this year. Looks superb. The sort of dark blue and white on the car. Very, very nice piece of kit. 11.5 minutes to go, but Gasly's got his mojo. He's quicker than Leclerc and Sainz. Russell is 4th. Verstappen now shuffled down into 5th. He's still out there on the medium tyres, Max Verstappen, pounding around in the 138s. So about 4 seconds off the pace as he's putting these laps in. Now into the final corner comes Alex Albon in the Williams. So his teammate Latifi was up to 9th. He's now shuffled down a little to 11th. And now we'll see what Albon can do on his return to Formula 1 after a year out. And he gets onto the brakes into the first corner. then on the power through the left-hander of 2, and then the charge up towards turn 4. He's got a bit of traffic up ahead of him. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine is keeping out of the way. He's also got one of the Hasses coming into the first corners, and that is Kevin Magnussen. And he's very wide there, Albin, almost going on the old track.
Yeah, he's gone off, got dust all over his tyres. It's really tricky when you come up to a gaggle of cars in front and you're desperate for them to get out of your way. It takes concentration away from yourself. Instead of thinking about the next corner and the next one, you spend too much effort and time thinking about where they're going to let you through and how they're going to let you through and how much time you're going to lose. And in this case, he's lost an absolute age going through turn 5.
Coming down the back straight now. He's been off at turn 4. Leclerc was off at turn 11 a little bit earlier on. Those are the only two sort of big moments that we've seen, with 10 minutes to go now in this first free practice session. Still Gasly quickest, Leclerc second, Sainz third, Russell fourth, Verstappen in fifth. Fernando Alonso, Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas are the only 3 drivers in the pit lane. Everybody else is out on track at the moment. Bottas missing quite a lot of running here, which is going to be frustrating for the Alfa Romeo driver. Also probably a bit frustrating for Zhou Guanyu, because he's going to sort of need Bottas's lap times as a comparison. As I say that, Bottas makes his way onto the track at turn 1. Albon's lap time puts him 13th quickest, only 4 tenths off Latifi despite that error.
Yeah, and he would have lost 3 or 4 tenths in that corner. For me, Alex Albon, he's another one, Jack, that needs a good year. Let's remember, he started off so well at AlphaTauri, then moved to Red Bull. It didn't work for him. He's then spent a year on the sidelines. He's come back into full-time Grand Prix racing. And this is a year where he really needs to have a year of dominance over his teammate Nicholas Latifi. Because remember, George Russell dominated Latifi for the last couple of seasons. If Alex Albon is really serious about his future involvement within Formula One, I think he's kind of got to do a George Russell.
Yeah, that would certainly make people sit up and take notice a little, wouldn't it? Hamilton now is on the soft tyre. He's just coming down into the final corner. He's on a lap at the moment, Hamilton. Comes out of the final turn, 15th quickest currently. Where is this lap time going to put him? It's personal bests in sectors 1 and 2, but it's 7th fastest. 7 tenths of a second slower than Pierre Gasly. Still a lot of caveats, still a lot of fuel loads and all of that kind of stuff, but that's not a particularly encouraging lap for Hamilton. 3 tenths slower than his teammate George Russell managed on the softs.
Yeah, we're starting to understand that Mercedes right now are definitely not the quickest team, Jack. I after testing, I thought, they're just playing and they're sandbagging, which was one of the 2 ways of looking at it. But they're not currently the quickest. There's homework to be done.
Ocon goes ahead of Alonso and up into 10th place. That's Sam Bird alongside me in the commentary box here, the former Mercedes reserve driver and the Jaguar Formula E driver. Mary says, no disrespect to Jolyon, but can we keep Sam Bird, please?
Thank you very much.
Hashtag BBC F1. So there we go. Yeah, that's from a Diane or something. But
yeah, Diane Bird 21.
No, it was from Mary, a completely impartial observer. 7 minutes on the clock. Josh Barrett says Martin Brundle did a part season in IMSA in 1990 before doing F1 with Brabham in 1991. For all of our people who loved the IMSA question, Zhou Guanyu down into the first corner. We've also got Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, alongside me in the commentary box here in Bahrain. Down in the pit lane itself is Jenny Gao, and we've got less than 7 minutes to go, and we will be with you for, I mean, you know this, but we'll be with you for every single session over the course of this 2022 Formula One World Championship season. So thank you for joining us for it. Joe comes through the first sector and he is 4 tenths down on Pierre Gasly on the soft tyres. Jenny.
Yeah, just having a look at Fernando Alonso's car at the moment, the Alpine. It's getting a lot of very thick silver tape added to the left-hand side, just on the inside of the wheel. So I don't know what's gone on there, but Fernando Alonso just waiting to head back out again. Hopefully he'll get out soon. Yeah, tape comes away, so there might be a little clip maybe that he's hit something. Who knows? But yeah, he's getting ready to go out now. And just on Gasly leading the times at the moment, he said to me this morning in the media pen, oh yeah, we're here, we're going to win the championship. I'm going to win the championship. I thought he was just being sarcastic.
be one of the sort of unknowns maybe of testing, but I don't think that that we're going to see them right at the front of the field in the way that this is suggesting currently, with Gasly fastest on a 1 minute 34.193. Leclerc is improving on this lap, although as I said that, he starts to lose a little bit of time. We do have an improvement from Zhou Guanyu, who jumps up into 13th place. You may remember our argument about naming procedures last year with Zhou, and Formula One have decided that he is Zhou Guanyu this year, so using the sort of Chinese form of having the family name before the given name, so that is how he will be referred. But he is Zhou. He's kind of Zhou in all senses. He uses Zhou as his nickname. It's also his surname, so he's just Zhou all the time.
So we're going with Zhou.
Yeah, we're going with Zhou.
Good. I'm chuffed that he's in Formula One. I think it's massive for the sport. He's the first of his nationality to be involved in the sport, right? So we're bringing a whole new fan base to Grand Prix racing. It's fantastic.
Did Ma Qinghua did a few FP1s, didn't he? I think.
Yeah, but
I know it doesn't count.
Yeah,
but I was just for my own.
But, yeah, this is the first proper. I was going to say proper driver, because that's shocking.
He's throwing them all in, isn't he? Perry McCarthy, Marc Rijard.
Yeah, exactly. But no, totally agree. And Zhou never quite delivered what he threatened to in Formula 2, because there were times he looked, okay, he might be a real title contender this year. That never quite materialised, but very strong.
He's here on, okay, yes, there's budget involved, but he's also here on merit.
Yeah.
He is quick enough to run within this field, absolutely. It's not just because of his nationality and backing and funding. Zhou can run in this paddock because of his talent.
Absolutely. Less than 4 minutes to go. Gasly quickest, and then the two Ferraris in second and third at the moment, Jenny.
Yeah, to answer the question of who's running which camera box in Ferrari land, 16, Charles Leclerc. He's got the black camera box, which by process of elimination must mean that Carlos Sainz in the number 55 car is running the Dayglow yellow, fluorescent yellow camera box. There you go.
Did you see that in the last corner?
Is there a problem, Max?
No, just look what happened in the last corner. Like suddenly there was a Ferrari just like massively turning to the right to two cars.
Understood.
There's just a bit of a traffic mess in the final couple of corners. The camera box that stood out last year was AlphaTauri, because Gasly had the yellow fluorescent one and Tsunoda had the plain one. I haven't noticed which way they are round this time. 3 minutes to go. The reason it's important to me, and it doesn't really matter to you listening on the radio, but it's important to me because that's one of the ways to tell the car apart. Now you can't see the helmets quite so much these days with the halo.
Or apparently who's number one driver and who's number two driver, according to you.
You need to get over that a little bit. I'm sure you're the number one. Or at least on equal terms. Josh Barrett and Mr. Eckersley, happy 2022 Mr. Eckersley, point out that Alan McNish won the ALMS in 2000 before joining Toyota in 2002. I don't know, are ALMS and IMSA the same thing? I don't actually know. Maybe they are.
I think ALMS was the precursor to IMSA.
Okay. But IMSA was around in the 80s, so maybe there was a period where IMSA was ALMS and now it's gone back. Anyway, 2 minutes to go. Gasly quickest. Alonso goes 8th fastest in the Alpine on the soft tyres. There's also going to be improvement here from Zhou again, and he goes up into 11th spot now. His teammate Valtteri Bottas, he went out and did a second install lap, but he's back in the pit lane, Bottas. So looks like there's not going to be any running for the Alfa Romeo driver joining his new team.
Nice to see though that these soft tyres can do multiple laps. That's the second push lap that Zhou's done, and okay, he's a rookie, he's going to be improving, but normally at some of these circuits you see a massive drop off on lap 2. The tyre would never be able to last that, but this new soft tyre seems to be able to work for multiple laps.
1 minute and 12 seconds left on the clock. Russell has done a personal best in Sector 1 in the Mercedes. It's a 30.269, which is about a tenth and a half slower than the fastest first sector, which was set by Carlos Sainz. He's now coming through the difficult downhill left-hander of turn 9 and 10, but it looked fairly straightforward for Russell through there. No snatching of the brakes. He's got a bit of traffic up in front with Nico Hülkenberg and Fernando Alonso. Both get out of the way coming into turn 11, so Russell is able to swing it through that left-hander again straightforwardly. We'll get his middle sector split in a moment, just over as he crests the rise and then drops down. He's 6/10 away from Gasly after the middle sector. So didn't do a personal best in the middle sector either, George Russell. And in fact, he's 4/10 off. He's not doing a personal best anymore. Down into the final corner. The right-hander of turn 14. Out across the line. And I don't think we're going to see an improvement here from George Russell. He does a 1 minute 34.35 in the end. A 1:35 for Russell. 0.209. 6/10 slower than he'd managed previously.
Yeah, just as I said that the tyres were lasting, for sure on the Mercedes, you can do something in Sector 1, but then Sector 2 and Sector 3, the tyre looked like it fell away. His hand movement into the last corner, Jack, you saw he just started to turn in and immediately had to turn out. The rear of the Mercedes isn't looking happy.
Checkered flag falls at the end of the first practice session. And it looks as though, well, we've got a bit of an improvement coming in from Fernando Alonso, but although he's dropped off now as he comes through the middle sector, Pierre Gasly is the quickest driver at the end of free practice 1. 8/10 quicker than his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Second fastest Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Third Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. Fourth George Russell on the soft tyres. Fifth Max Verstappen. Sixth Lance Stroll. Seventh Lewis Hamilton. Eighth Fernando Alonso. Ninth Yuki Tsunoda. 10th Sergio Perez. Zhou, Ocon, Latifi, Hülkenberg and Albon the top 15. The two McLarens, I think, never improved from their very first laps out there. Norris and Ricciardo were quickest in the very early stages and then presumably did long running for 20 laps and ended up in 16th and 17th. Schumacher 18th, 3/10 quicker than Kevin Magnussen in 19th. No lap time for Valtteri Bottas.
Well, that is it, the first practice session of a brand new season. And who knew Pierre Gasly would top the timesheets? Sam, we shouldn't get too excited, I'm assuming. That's what you're going to say to me. Just calm down, Jenny.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Look, it's
so
great,
predictable.
really good, but let's have a look at some of the others as well, Jenny. You know, you've got the Ferraris up there on the mediums. That's very important. We got Verstappen up there, did a time very early, then concentrated on long running. It's great that we've got Pierre Gasly up there, but I would look at who else is up there as well, and you've got Leclerc, Sainz and Verstappen, who really look like the form men currently. Mercedes, where are they? Well, I think they're struggling a little bit, Jenny. Looking at the rear of the car, it looks difficult to drive. They are struggling for pace. Even though they're on the softs, they're not at the front.
I still think everybody's computing the fact that Mercedes might not have built the best car. That sounds stupid. It sounds maybe slightly biased, but they've got 8 Constructors' Championships in a row, Jack. It's not coming from nowhere, is it? This kind of aghast look at, how have Mercedes got it wrong if they have got it wrong?
It's the level of the adriftness, though, isn't it? I think that's the thing. At the moment, Red Bull, Ferrari look like they're in the mix. Maybe Mercedes, maybe they didn't have the quickest car last year, but they're in contention. They don't look in contention at the moment. That's the big difference. It's one thing not dominating like they have in the past, but it's another thing not being in the ballpark.
Do they need to find a silver bullet for the silver arrow then, Sam? And how well resourced are they to do that? How possible will it be?
If any team can go away, work on something and then get it right, it is Mercedes. They've got such good resources, Jenny. So many people working on this project. So, okay, if it's not working now, let's face it, it will work at some point. The last time that they didn't have the fastest car was probably 2013. It's just coincidence that I was their reserve driver and development driver then. But,
so you did all the development.
It was complete. Obviously, it's my fault, and now I'm nothing to do with it. So it's the first time that.
Yeah, but you are back in the paddock. Is that just the effect you have?
Maybe it's that, Jenny. Maybe it's that. But look, they've got a wonderful amount of resources available to them and great personnel to get this right. Okay, right now, not the quickest. Let's see how it goes for the rest of the weekend.
Jack, bad day in the office for Valtteri Bottas. We know the Alfa Romeo is fragile. I think that's the way we termed it this morning. they've got to find some reliability in that car, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, Joe got 20 laps in and ended up 11th quickest, which was not too bad at all. Frustrating for Bottas, and actually, I'm kind of a bit excited by Bottas this season because he had a tough time against Hamilton, but in the midfield, I think we could see some stunning displays from him. So it's a shame he didn't get much running done, but we've got another practice session in 2 hours time.
Oh, still my line. I was just about to say that. Come back and join us at 5 to 6 our time, which will be 5 to 3 your time if I've got my maths right, which is probably not. So we end the first practice session of the brand new season with Pierre Gasly on top spot in the AlphaTauri, and then the 2 Ferraris just behind them in second and third place. See what happens when the lights start to go down, the sun sets, and the racing and practice gets underway.